So I don't usually do videos, but I'm trying to explain something that I feel like is the type of topic where if it was just written, it might seem hard to understand or something. So this is a consideration, a kind of concern that I have, and it's also an interesting sort of opportunity that we find ourselves in as a society. So I'm just going to lay it out. So basically, I've written it on here, and I'll be reading from my screen so that I can remain clear. So yeah, basically dealing with the stress and mental constraint caused by social distancing and the immense uncertainty of the situation and the likelihood of like a huge healthcare snafu, plus the urgency to kind of facilitate emergency basic needs provisions due to COVID-19. These are relatively short-term concerns, and they're absolutely necessary to think about and to work in. So I'm extremely glad that people are taking this really seriously and organizing around it. But I also feel like a few people just need to start thinking about how to brace ourselves for sort of like the marathon struggle and the economic situation that our community is in right now, together for the long term. So like for nerdy systemic thinkers like me, it's apparent that we're already speeding into a multi-year recession, and Ithaca has a special situation that provides quite the crisis, but also quite the opportunity. There's a website that I'll post that has some great data visualizations of our economy, and it shows that in the population, Ithaca's workforce is 10.9% in retail, 9.4% in accommodation and food service, and 4.3% in leisure and hospitality. So those sectors are already heavily hit. So altogether that means almost a quarter, or like 24.5% of the local economy is already taking a severe hit, or will have their income pretty much completely annihilated for a few weeks. Plus, there's an additional 42.7% who are in educational services, so they are now mostly at home. In terms of individuals, this is about 8,000 people that aren't in work right now. That's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to channel our now free time and energy into building up resilience and remaking our economy so that we can thrive while the global economy disintegrates. There's also a deeper issue, and it's that recessions happen when spending or some form of credit or lending suddenly drops off. This shock, wherever it occurs, then dries up the financial resources that would normally flow to other sectors of the economy. Once those sectors start seeing their incomes drop because no one has income to spend, they start reining in their spending too. So you can see why this is a problem. Everyone's income is someone else's spending, so when everyone spends less, everyone has less income. So those 8,000 Ithacans with no income now, well, they're going to be spending less with the other Ithacans, and those Ithacans are going to see their incomes dwindle. They'll slash spending in hours and everything else. But stay calm and keep listening. Quite simply, the economy behaves like a system of flow, like water. And if the rains or snowmelt, which normally pumps water into the system, initially stop occurring, the whole system dries up. In Ithaca, that rain and snowmelt comes primarily from the colleges and from tourism, both of which will not be present in the months to come. Given the current trajectory, there's simply not enough money in the system to keep things from drying up. And again, stay chill and keep listening. It's not just a doom and gloom thing. So then the most commonly considered solution or hope is to have some sort of bailout or stimulus from the federal government which will pump water into the mountaintops and allow it to flow down and through the economy. It's kind of a deus ex machina solution. It's a supplication to a government that continues to fail us, and I don't have much faith in this. Not only that, but as long as people are out of work, there will need to be an ongoing stimulus to the poorest people for months, something that pretty much never happens anywhere. Another likely solution is massive issuance of debt through low interest and high interest credit. So the Fed has cut interest rates, which makes it easier for banks and financial institutions to make money off of loans. Lowering interest rates basically makes it more profitable for banks to offer credit to people. So we'll definitely see that happening as banks offer loans and credit cards to tide people over for the time being. Of course, this isn't a real solution. It's just a method for banks to make money off people's pain, or disaster capitalism, as Naomi Klein calls it. So to pay back these loans, the bank will require interest, thereby draining a locality of the money that's already scarce to begin with during a recession. So again, it's not a real solution. The vast majority of economists in charge of economic policy can really only think of these two ideas, stimulus packages and interest rates. They're not very creative, and they tend to cause future problems with their solutions. So these will be the economic proposals that you're going to see. They're going to get the most airtime from people that like to tell each other they're smart and important, and they're going to perpetuate the crisis. But there's a totally different type of solution, one that economists rarely think about, but which does have historical precedent, and it has something to do with something called the velocity of money. So even though the economy is kind of like a water system, it's not exactly the same, and one key difference is that the same drop of water, or monetary unit like a single dollar, can actually be reused over and over and over by different entities without drying up. The rate at which a drop, or dollar, gets reused is called the velocity of money. The more quickly a drop or dollar moves from person to person, the higher the velocity of money. And a high velocity of money is often an indicator of a strong economy. I'll include a handy little video to explain that concept as well. So, one clever way to counter recessions is by incentivizing people to spend money at a faster rate. There's less money in the system, so people have to spend the money that does exist faster, pretty much right as they get the money. But of course, the psychology of crisis creates exactly the opposite effect. An uncertain future makes people want to hoard what they think they'll need. So if you think about what's happening with toilet paper and hand sanitizer, that's going to be what happens with money. So, a thing that has historical precedent of working to counter that is called demurrage, which is basically a deterioration rate or half-life on the value of the currency unit. So the idea behind demurrage is that if you don't spend your dollar within a month, let's say, it then deteriorates and becomes worth only 90 cents. Then perhaps after another month, it might lose another 10% of its value and become 81 cents, and so on. But if you do spend it, perhaps it doesn't deteriorate for the person receiving it. There are a few technical ways to do this, to create a demurrage currency, and although it might make a lot of sense to do one digitally, one of the most often cited success stories of this comes from Austria in the town of Wörgl, where in 1932 and 33, the mayor deployed a solution, which was a demurrage currency. As described by the monetary economist Bernard Lietaer, he says, instead of spending 4,000 shillings on starting the first of his long list of projects, he being the mayor, he decided to put the money on deposit with a local savings bank as a guarantee for issuing Wörgl's own 40,000 shillings worth of stamp scrip, which is what this currency was, which is what this type of currency is called. He then used the stamp scrip to pay for the first project. Because the stamp needed to be applied each month at 1% of the face value, everyone who was paid with the stamp scrip made sure he or she was spending it quickly, automatically providing work for others. When people had run out of ideas of what to spend their stamp scrip on, they even decided to pay their taxes early. Wörgl was the first town in Austria to effectively manage to redress the extreme levels of unemployment. He goes on to say that the bulk of the work was provided by the circulation of the stamp scrip after the first people contracted by the mayor spent it. In fact, every one of the shillings in stamp scrip created between 12 and 14 times more employment than the normal shillings circulating in parallel. The anti-hoarding device proved extremely effective as a spontaneous work-generating device. So this is a clever solution because it counters the incentive to hoard money by destroying the ability to do it, to hoard. And that's countered in the currency's architecture itself. This type of currency is designed to incentivize the spending of money. So I've actually worked with 3 currencies, and all of them have kind of like languished or failed, which might not sound like a reason to believe me. But I mention this because they all languished and failed, maybe because my bosses literally never listened to anything I told them. Despite having hired me because I'd studied community currencies quite intensely and I really knew my stuff. I gave up dealing with currencies because I felt like they were operated too often by people who were very idealistic and intelligent, but who also just didn't respond to feedback or behavioral psychology or the actual needs of people and businesses. But now I'm returning to it because I feel like Ithaca really needs a solution that is kind of like a currency, but what I'm thinking about is a little bit different. Specifically, it has to do with the local conditions in and around Ithaca. It's fascinating and fortunate timing that this crisis has become right as the farming season is beginning. And it's also very lucky that people here are already familiar with the CSA model. See, if you think about it, CSA is already an existing community finance mechanism. It's a way of providing a zero-interest loan to a farmer to fund their operation for a season. Only instead of paying back the loan in dollars, the farmer pays it back in produce. So think about this. In a local economy where there's simply not enough money in the system, there is a slightly different way to do a CSA. Farms, and actually any type of grower, including people doing homesteading or just growing veggies in their yards, they can pre-sell tradable gift certificates to that have a claim upon their produce. So instead of giving the same person a claim to a CSA buck each week, that person would get gift certificates in denominations and redeemable in farm produce. Then that person can give or sell those gift certificates to friends, family, or people they deem to pay but don't have enough US dollars to pay with. So it's kind of like a produce-backed currency. By produce-backed, I mean they're tradable gift certificates which have obvious concrete values that anyone can redeem in veggies, fruit, milk, or whatever else. The elegance of this type of solution is that it has multiple components. Not only does it incentivize people to grow produce and to have the funding to buy supplies and spend time doing it, but it augments the monetary supply too. See, when you pay for your CSA in US dollars, when you pay for the CSA, the US dollars go to the farmer who can then spend that currency. But you can't transfer your CSA. But in this system, let's say each week CSA is worth about $30. So under this system, maybe you get a set of 6 $5 bills that are redeemable for the farm's produce, but they expire at a certain point in the season if they aren't spent. So maybe you get $120 worth of these special farm units, and they expire at the end of June, and another $120 that expire at the end of July, and so on. And then you can trade these units with anyone. So can you see what this does? Not only does the farmer get to use the US dollars that you have paid him, but the tradable produce-backed bills are also still in circulation. So every dollar paid to the farmer through this type of program would be multiplied by 2 for a certain duration of time. One would be a US dollar, and the other would be the bill that has the claim on that produce, but still circulating within the local economy. So at the end of the month or the season, they'd expire, but until then, the monetary supply locally is augmented by that additional local currency. Only it would be backed by real wealth, which is food. And this benefits everyone in the community because the money is then less scarce in the community. The fact that they expire at different weeks is the demurrage component. There's a disincentive to hoard these produce-backed units, because you either have to go to the farm and pick up the produce, or you have to trade it with someone who will, or otherwise the bills are going to lose their value. So yeah, that's kind of like the concept. This is not just like some idealistic thing, and I'm not like a brilliant person who came up with this by myself. This is another concept that has been implemented and has worked in the past, and when I worked for a new economics think tank a few years back, they had assisted years before I worked there with starting something of this type. Those were called the Berkshire Farm Preserve Notes. Took place in western Massachusetts in the 90s, and the two farms that issued the notes before the season, they issued these notes in tradable denominations, which could be redeemed in farm produce during the season, and they did this as an alternative to getting a bank loan. So, as I mentioned at the start of this video, there are probably 8,000 people who aren't working right now. Well, Ithaca being Ithaca, there are a lot of people who are capable of producing food, even in their backyards, and it is spring. So every bit of locally produced food that's consumed here will actually offset the money flowing out of Ithaca and into the region that would normally import the food from. So this is an additional benefit, which is also known as import replacement or import substitution. This helps regions or nations stop hemorrhaging their wealth and instead allow it to flow more within the locality for a while. Also important, as you may have realized, this type of solution is not just limited to farms and food. Any local producer can theoretically issue tradable, transferable gift certificates in small denominations that are redeemable in their own products and services. I think Autumn Leaves used to do that, and maybe still does. And in regards to the Berkshire Farm Preserve Notes, there was a deli in the same region, also in the 90s, that issued notes in a similar manner to conduct renovations. So there are also like some landmines that you have to avoid while doing this, because there are plenty of wrong ways to issue currency. They all tend to come back to just like not understanding the system or overissuing. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, please reach out to me. And yeah, there's a lot more ideas to come, but that's all for now.